Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be definitively figuring out who is the best final slot for a Nefer team. It's of course the same question that Skirkmates have been wondering for the longest time about her team, so we're going to be tackling that for Nefer as well. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to put a variety of characters through the simulacrum on my account and see what the difference is in team DPS. With some analysis, we can figure out who actually is the one that will be the best character for Nefer. For these tests, I'm going to keep Nefer, Llama, and Columbina's builds the same for the most part. That way, we have some level of control in these tests. Some of you may have noticed that we don't have Deep Wood on anyone. But despite that, we won't be defaulting to using Deep Wood on all of the final slots for the simple reason that I'm lazy and I would never expect anyone to have farmed 10 different Deep Wood builds. Also, like I mentioned in the Should You Get Nefer video, Jamie has actually put together a graphic to summarize the TC point of view. So I will of course be looking at the more practical perspective. But before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more Genshin Impact content, because your support, as always, will help combat the dreaded YouTube algorithm. Alright, let's get into it. Let's start off with a slightly unusual option, Diona, specifically C6 Diona, because essentially the thing about the three core characters in the Nefer team is that everyone uses EM to deal damage, which of course naturally makes C6 Diona's plus 200 EM buff pretty good. Now to some extent, the problem is that she only buffs the on-fielder and inner circle as she heals, which pretty much makes Diona the Bennett of Nefer teams. This is a build that I have on Diona, but I don't think it matters that much how you build her. Her buffing capability for a Nefer team is going to remain the same because it's basically tied to her C6. If nothing else, Diona can at least function as a perfectly serviceable healing option if you don't have C1 Llama.
Session ends here. With one heart, we pray. Lush is the moon.
Look at you, Boomtail! Think you can bully me? Shake your ass!
Can I disprove? It all adds up.
Diona special! Scratch! Shake and stir!
Can I disprove? No more love. The mystery unravels. For the everlasting quest. Receive my blood.
Hey, now that you're dream! Oh, think you can bully me?
It all adds up. No more lies.
Sticking with the theme of 4 stars with small parts of their kit that matter, we have Aino. Aino has off-field Hydro application that doesn't need normal attacks to trigger, so that does actually make her valuable for Nefer teams, if you aren't already using Columbina. At baseline, her kit otherwise doesn't really do anything for Nefer. We really only have her artifact set options as something useful, but also with her constellations, she ends up with a couple of meaningful ways to buff Nefer. Her C1 gives Nefer another 80 EM, which is not a huge buff in the grand scheme of things, but it is something, and her C6 gives Nefer 35 lunar damage %. On top of that, her C2 kind of makes Aino not exactly circle impact anymore. Every 5 seconds her Ducky ult can fire a Hydra shot with what seems to be infinite range. But of course, having a 5-second gap between these hits does mean that if your target is too far away, you really just can't rely on Aino as the only Hydro app if you want to be generating enough verdant dues. But of course, all of that goes out the window with Columbina on the team. At that point, you're really only getting the C1 and C6 buffs if you have them, and that's all that is going to be relevant for Aino and, well, maybe the build as well. Here's the build that I have on her. As you can see, I haven't invested that much into her, but I also have Serenade on Llama, so there wasn't a need to put Serenade on Aino either. Hence, Instructor is the way that I've gone. Obviously, you can use Deep Wood as well, but I didn't. So I'm giving everyone another 120 EM during Nefer's DPS window. So at least in terms of these teams, she can react with the overwhelming Dendro aura and take advantage of that instructor set in some way.
No more lies. The deception ends here. Can I the truth? No more lies. Can I the truth?
Moving on, let's look at some folks from way back in the Sumeru days when the very concept of Bloom was first released. We'll start off with Nilou, who gets super cucked in this team. Nilou famously is all about the super blooms, the crazy rapid AoE DPS, and really the only way to make Bloom gameplay feel interesting and strong, unless of course you're a very die-hard Kave main. But thankfully, despite Nefer locking access away to these blink boom seeds, we still can use a fair bit of Nilou's kit. Nilou's skill is still Hydro App that follows you around, but again that is made redundant with Column Beta on the team. Nilou's A1 still works in this team so long as you actually get hit by Dendro attacks, because normally this is by taking Bloom damage, the self damage, but Nefer locks that away with the use of her skill, so this ends up not really existing anymore after the first rotation, unless of course you're fighting something that just does Dendro damage. And of course, Nilou being an HP scaling Hydro character does mean we can max out the Ascendant Gleam buff for the direct lunar damage. It's a real waste of her kit to put Nilou on Nefer teams, but if you happen to have her C2, there is another 35% res shred to play with, which I'm going to be getting at some point when the free constellation rolls over again. Also, if you're like me and you have Key of Karsh's suit, you can of course give Nefer, and the rest of the team actually, even more EM to play with. Here's the build I have on Nilou. It's a standard 2-piece HP build. You can use Deep Wood on her again, but like, I'm lazy. It is what it is. I try not to switch builds as much as possible and save that only for a handful of characters where circumstances dictate that it's kind of unavoidable. That's just how I play. Otherwise, I'd rather be playing Nilou with a DPS Column Beta team than a Nefer team, and like I mentioned, in the grand scheme of things, I would have been getting more value for my Primo Gems in that regard.
No more lies.
Staying in Sumeru, we have Nahida. Sweet, lovable, adorable, wonderful, must protect Nahida, who is also the first Dendro entry in today's video. There's a couple of things that actually make Nahida a great option for Nefer teams. Using her ult gives Nefer a bunch of EM based on who has the most EM on the team, which in my case happens to be Nefer herself. Apparently it also snapshots, so if you use Lalma's skill and get the Serenade buff, and then you use Nahida's ult, that of course gives more EM to Nefer. But only a little bit, since I'm already really close to 1000 EM on Nefer as is. Starting with Nahida's skill does also mean you can generate dews a lot earlier, which does mean that even in the first rotation you can use hold skill Llama for the nuke and therefore more Bloomgen stacks, especially with Column Beta's Mountain Dew also generating for the team. And Nahida, being an EM scaling Dendro character, means we can get a fair bit of the Ascendant Gleam buff. Now apparently that caps out at 1600 EM, which I have no idea how to achieve on someone like Nahida. At best we're getting around half the Ascendant Gleam buff with my build, I think. Having Column Beta on the team means Nahida's ult lasts 6 seconds longer at crown level, but I also have her C1, which means her ult actually lasts 9 seconds longer, instead making it 24 seconds long. The rotation duration should be around bang on 20 seconds, so with proper energy management, we're looking at basically a permanent uptime on the Shrine of Maya. On top of that, I have C2 Nahida, which means we're essentially double dipping on Llama's A1 passive with regards to the direct Lunar Bloom damage crit value buff for Nefer, Llama, and Column Beta on the team. So here's the build that I am using on Nahida, except change the weapon from Kategari to Favj and basically add 50 ER. This is not a quicken team, so Nahida's not going to be doing that much DPS at all. Instead, Favj really is the linchpin between everyone getting their ults back on time versus everyone not. And thankfully, Nahida's A4 means the EM she has will translate to crit rate, which of course means we can proc Favj more regularly. Nahida is also permanently on Deepwood for me, thus giving her another small advantage over the other characters. despite not doing that much damage, her skill hitting enemies regularly maintains the red shred on them, and I don't think there's any alternative builds worth looking at for Nahida, since she's Dendro, so instructors won't work. You can't react with the aura that's permanently on the target. She's not doing much damage, so Golden Troop is not going to be worthwhile. 2-piece EM seems worthless if you can't get more EM than Nefer on Nahida, which again in my case is very difficult with Nefer dangerously close to 1000. In content that doesn't involve multiple waves, Nahida seems to be really good, and even in multi-wave content we can briefly swap away from Nefer after a round of charge attacks to of course reapply the Seed of Skandha. Changing to some more contemporary options now, I first want to tackle the Ineffa situation, because in my Nefer Llama Rerun video I specifically stated that I wouldn't recommend Ineffa for Nefer teams. I stand by that on principle, despite the apparent strength of this team regardless. Here's what Ineffa can provide for the team: a shield. Not the most useful thing in the world if you have C1 Llama. And Nefer has, as far as I understand, interruption resistance while doing her charge attacks. I don't think I've really ever faced interruption problems, at least in memory. She also has EM share to Nefer based on Ineffa's own attack. In my case, I am giving Nefer another 167 EM, which in the grand scheme of things is not huge, but still something. It's less than C6 Diona's buff though. But due to the almost permanent Dendro aura, we're not getting that many Lunar Charge reactions over a 2-minute period. If you look at the reaction tracker, you'll find there are way more Lunar Bloom reactions from Columbina and way more Aggravate reactions from Ineffa. Now, if you pay attention to just above the target, there are only very brief moments where a Thundercloud is made from a Lunar Charge reaction, and this happens either because Llama's skill has ended, or Columbina's ult, having 2 units of Hydro Amp and then immediate use of her skill with another 1 unit of Hydro Amp, may have miraculously overpowered that Dendro aura. Only then do we get Ineffa's A1 working, which is where a fair majority of her DPS actually comes from. Thunderclouds only last for 6 seconds, which means during those moments you can get 3 hits of Ineffa's direct Lunar Charge damage. The fact that she does any damage at all really is what's making her stronger than C6 Diona, but I suspect if you actually invested heavily into your Nefer, you might be getting better results with the cat instead of the robot. So here's the build I have on Ineffa, and yes, it's Serenade, despite that I already have Serenade on Llama, because my Serenade Ineffa build is very strong, whilst my Morningstar Ineffa build apparently results in very similar DPS, or potentially less DPS even. If you're desperate, then Ineffa works, but I really don't like her on the team. In a similarly psychotic nature, we also have Linnea, the recently released Lunar Crystallized support. Because once again, it's the lack of a Hydra aura due to the almost permanent Dendro aura on the team that's keeping Linnea from accessing the most important parts of her kit. Here's what Linnea can bring to the team. Team healing with her ult. Again, not super useful if you already have C1 Llama, but I suppose against things that can attack the team like the Gecko and the Moth, there's some utility to that. There's Geo Red Shred, but of course that only affects Linnea's DPS. And finally, we have EM share to Nefer based on 5% of Linnea's defense. In my case, we're looking at around 114 EM. When it comes to Linnea's DPS, most of the time she only has access to her Geo off-field DPS. If you want the Lunar Crystallized DPS, you need to have the Lunar Crystallized turrets around, which is where the whole permanent Dendro aura problem comes right back. But just like the Ineffa situation, there are brief moments where Columbina can give us a Hydra aura, and if Lumi happens to hit that enemy that has the Hydra aura at that moment, we can actually summon Lunar Crystallized turrets, and Lumi will do some direct Lunar Crystallized DPS. But unlike Ineffa, where it's always basically by pure chance that we can get direct Lunar Charge damage, Linnea actually at least has an option to get through all her Lunar Crystallized DPS in one foul swoop, and that's why of course playing multi-tap Nuke Linnea, because you can do direct Lunar damage without needing any Lunar Crystallized turrets around. Here's the build I have on Linnea. Pretty sure if you're fast on your gameplay, you can still get the Morningstar buff on your Lumi Nuke hit. It usually takes me around 2 seconds to get it all sorted out, but that's pretty much 75% of Linnea's DPS at that point. Strangely enough though, I did have very similar results with single versus multi-tap Linnea, 1k team DPS more with multi-tap Linnea, so I guess it's kind of in the margin of error somehow.
Where the frost moon holds.
Can't hide the truth. The deception ends here.
One of the the most obvious choices is Sucrose, whose entire kit is about giving everyone a bunch of EM. The amount of EM that she gives is dependent on how much EM she has. So if anything, for those who know, she's basically the Nicole for Nefer teams. Sucrose might be one of the more interesting options because you're probably trying to keep in mind what's the state of your Sucrose. Can you get her ult back or not? The interesting thing about Sucrose is that most of her EM share comes from her A4 passive, which just simply needs either her skill or her ult to hit something, and then suddenly everyone except Sucrose gets 20% of her EM. Which is great because unlike Nahida's, her EM share is uncapped and it could also be triggered off field, thus making her ult quite valuable. The EM share lasts for 8 seconds, so for a rotation that generally lasts 20 seconds, you definitely don't want to just be using her skill at the start and then moving on. It seems like the 8-second duration is long enough to cover Nefer's on-field time, including her ult, I think. But if you use her ult and you're able to get to the Nefer part of the DPS rotation before the butterfly is gone, you're pretty much good to go and you can get maximum damage out of the team. But I would probably only use Sucrose's ult whenever it's actually already ready, with like a skill into burst just to funnel some of her own energy back to herself. Here's the build I'm using, and yes, you're not seeing this wrong, it's VV, because once again, I'm lazy. There's no hidden special mechanic to using VV and getting a Hydro Red Shred to buff the DPS in any meaningful capacity. No, it's just because I'm lazy and I don't have enough EM pieces on Instructor's set to bother. The sad thing about Instructors is that it cannot get the 4-piece effect off-field, and it only lasts for 8 seconds, and you need Sucrose to trigger a reaction, so honestly, it kind of sounds really difficult to use, but I guess there are the Sucrose meta mains out there who can figure it out. I guess if you get yourself a Hydro-infused butterfly, then that'll do the trick, but then it just sounds like an Eon nightmare for Sucrose.
By the frost in the hole.
Let me know in the comments what your experience has been of Instructor's Sucrose in a team like this. Another 4-star anime character we all need to look at is Jahoda, specifically C6 Jahoda. Because Jahoda happens to be on the Nefer Lauma rerun as a raid-up character, so some of us have managed to get her to C6. In fact, last Tuesday night I managed to get her final constellation. First things first, Jahoda needs a Hydro Aura to be active in order for her kit or her C6 to actually work, so the previously mentioned almost permanent Dendro Aura should be quite detrimental for the Jahoda experience. But by some sheer miracle, if you follow the rotation that you're seeing on screen, it seems like by the time you wrap back to Jahoda's part of the rotation, Lauma's field of Dendro just seems to run out. So Columbina's Hydro app can make the Hydro Aura for Jahoda's bottle to fill up. So rise up Jahoda's witnesses, for she first and foremost actually works in an Nefer team, which makes it of course more accurate since she is of course an employee of the Curatorium of Secrets. But what kind of buffs does Jahoda provide? Well, when the character currently on field gets healed, if they happen to have more than 70% of their HP, they get another 100 EM for 6 seconds. I think this mainly just works for the Bloomgen stacks and Nefer's DPS if you look at the rotation that we're using. I have found therefore that using her ult to be a small DPS increase as a result of this passive. And if you have her C6, then filling up her bottle gives all Moonsign characters plus 50 CV in the form of 5 crit rate and 40 crit damage. The build that I'm using is Instructors and Fav, so we are of course looking at pure support Jahoda. The Instructor buff tends to start after you fill up the bottle and then trigger a Hydro Swirl. That seems to last until the second half of Nefer's DPS window, when you will of course lose the team EM buff. There's also not that much attack on my Jahoda build, so her healing is going to be a bit weaker than traditional Jahoda builds, I guess, but it is still 4k healing ticks as far as I can tell, so in a team without Farina and also against content that isn't team hits like the aforementioned Gecko or the Moonfly, yeah, it seems like it's going to be alright as a buffer against death. I'm not so sure if there's a mechanic in Jahoda's kit that I'm momentarily forgetting, but I do find that using her ult into her skill seems to be the best way to get her bottle filled as quickly as possible. But as we see in this footage, the team seems to function a lot better than I expected. I even tried a DPS build on Jahoda, but she ended up with only 7% of the team's DPS, so yeah, that seems like it's not really necessary. Also, one thing to note, Jahoda's bottle filling does result in the team rotation being longer than 20 seconds, which of course makes it not fit all that nicely in a 2-minute testing time for all of the other teams in this video. Hence, I had to basically cook the final rotation a little bit to essentially get the whole thing to fit in a little bit nicer.
Can I disprove?
I wanted to chuck in someone from way back when, the alleged Geo Archon, who's of course not called well. Basically, the main thing that he offers is red shred, so long as of course the shield is active. In a similar case to Linnea, you won't be getting any lunar crystallizers without the underlying Hydra aura, but unlike Linnea, Zhongli doesn't really care. I mean, I guess Linnea doesn't really care either if you're doing nuke Linnea shenanigans. All that being said, and exclusively because I was bored, I built and used Zhongli for his ult, despite it of course being very much a DPS loss. It's not like there are any other usual Zhongli builds or even unusual Zhongli builds that are going to work. Hell, I tried Instructor Zhongli and ended up with the most minimal DPS increase whilst having significantly less interesting gameplay. But sure, if you are truly desperate, the Universal Red Shred option is always someone you can use.
No more lies. Seek within.
Order guide you. Stabilize.
For the everlasting forest, receive my a moonlit night for all.
Can I disprove? It all falls into place. It all adds up. It all falls into place.
Gather.
By the frost moon of old, lush as the moon.
No more lies. The mystery unravels.
With one heart, we pray. Receive my green moon converge.
It all falls into place. It all adds up.
By the frost moon of old, lush as the moon. A moonlit night for all.
Staying in Liu for a second, we also have Dr. Baizhu. Baizhu is a Dendro off-fielder who has some kind of advantage that Nahida has, which is of course that your first rotation can use the Lauma hold skill. So I've been really liking him as a final slot in content that absolutely doesn't need the extra DPS. On top of that, Baizhu is one of the most effective healers in the game. So if you don't have Lauma C1, Baizhu is very easily able to keep the team very healthy. The main buff that Baizhu has is of course tied to his A4 and his ult, where Lunar Bloom can actually get up to 35% damage based on his HP. In my case, I'm getting just a smidge over 31.5. But otherwise, it's the healing and the Dendro app allowing for early Lauma hold skills that are of course going to be the advantages of someone like Baizhu. Here's the build I have on him. Favs remains once again the linchpin to ensuring everyone gets their ults back. I have his C1, which makes it easier to get both Favs to proc and his ult to come back, whilst having his C2 kinda can take a bit of the stress out of absolutely needing to use his ult, insofar as even without his ult, I can still get the off-field Dendro app against single target at least, so that Deepwood effectively has permanent uptime.
Converge. Surge.
Remember, health comes first.
The doctor was sealed.
For the everlasting forest.
No more lies. It all falls into place. Can't hide the truth. The mystery unravels.
The new moon rises.
The doctor was sealed.
Seems like an
By the frost moon of old.
It all adds up.
And finally, we have the illustrious in the extreme, Her Royal Highness, the Queen of Sass, Yae Miko, the Wise and Beautiful, who of course isn't a buff option in any way, shape or form. Instead, we're able to take advantage of the permanent Dendro aura to effectively play an aggravate DPS off-fielder. not much needs to be said. Here's the build I have on Miko. Obviously, it's all pretty standard stuff that everyone should already have or work towards. Two-piece is what I still prefer personally because I like using her ult for some more damage, and of course her signature is her best in slot, and her constellations serve to improve her own personal DPS. I can't wait to see another Inazuma Chronicle banner so that I can finally get her C6, because as it turns out, the Queen is a pretty good option for Nefer teams.
Receive my breath. Can't hide the truth. No more lies.
Emerge right now, right here.
By the frost on the wall, rushes the moon.
A new moon rises.
It all adds up. It all falls into place. No more lies.
I'm always watching. Right now, emerge.
Receive my blood.
A moonlit night for all.
Can't hide the truth.
For the everlasting course,
Right now, right here, right now.
rushes the moon.
No more lies.
A new moon rises.
It all adds up. It all falls into place.
By the frost on the wall, receive my breath.
Right here, right now.
No more lies. It all falls into place. The deception ends here.
So those are the characters that I tried, and naturally we're going to be looking at how well they all ranked based on these simulacra runs. So here are the rankings. And it seems clear to me that the lesson of the day is that everyone should actually just get out there and get C6 Jahoda from, of course, the Nefer rerun, for she is in fact the key to all of this. No, I'm kidding. Look, one thing I want to mention is that before I had a better understanding of how to actually use Yahoda in a Nefer team, assuming I even have the best understanding of how to use Yahoda in a Nefer team, I did try playing Yahoda in a Nefer team without C6 and I got about 95k DPS. As soon as I got C6 Yahoda, I tried again on stream in a similar manner with similar builds and I ended up with 110k DPS. So it seems to me like the C6 in C6 Yahoda is, let's say, about a 15k DPS increase, give or take. So with that in mind, I would imagine with C5 or under Yahoda, she might actually be giving the team around about 100 and let's say 15k DPS, give or take. Let me know if you're getting similar results in that regard. But otherwise, look, Ineffa being so high up the list is just because power creep is real and it's kind of nuts. But as soon as I have Miko's C6, we should be seeing a fair bit more DPS with her on the team over Ineffa and possibly even Yahoda. We'll just have to see. But either way, should that happen, balance would have been restored. But between Ineffa and Zhongli, there's a 15k DPS difference, which kind of just says to me that at the end of the day, if you don't have C2 Nahida or hell, C6 Jahoda, I wouldn't worry too hard about which option you'd use. They're kind of not too far from each other. You can really just pick one of them. Let me understand all this in the comments below. Who are you using as the final slot in your Nefer team? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, hope you guys enjoyed. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin Impact action, and until next time, I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.
She's